In the year 2020, I started a podcast about movies. Some episodes occasionally focused on other media as well. As I dealt with threatening interdimensional beings, I eventually met my other self from another universe where all the stuff I talked about got delayed. As it turns out, the stories as me and my guests described them were presented very differently in that other universe. So I continued podcasting these recaps, which apparently sound like improvised reviews, to entertain listeners of that other universe while they waited for the new release dates. Some episodes even focused on content of years past that did not come out in that other universe for whatever reason. The year is 2022. The podcast is now bi-weekly, unless stated otherwise. My name is Steven Shinder, and you're listening to Delayed Replay. Hello, listeners. Welcome to another episode of Delayed Replay, that podcast where we recap and review movies that got delayed in that other universe, or sometimes even got canceled, but came out on time in our universe. I'm your host, as always, Steven Shinder, and joining me again, same guest as last week. He's even been on a few other Star Wars-related episodes, and this time we're talking about the new movie Rogue Squadron. It is Starrapter. What's up, my dude?
What's up, Steven? Yeah, Rogue Squadron. I am excited to talk about this movie that was a movie in this different universe. Yeah, I'm excited to jump in this cockpit and start doing some dogfighting here.
Yeah, because in that other universe, I guess it got delayed, and like there's some stuff with like Patty Jenkins' availability and Wonder Woman 3 and all sorts of weird stuff. It's kind of confusing, but yeah, I'm glad we got it now in this universe, so we have some Star Wars movie to talk about at least.
Oh, yeah. I mean, taking it back to 2020, and there's that big day that not a lot of us even knew was coming, which was that Investors Day meeting, which, usually the whole world's not watching something like that. It's just literally for the investors. But hey, they just decided to drop the bombs that they did on us, which was Andor and the Acolyte and the droid story, which, by the way, the droid story was so good, wasn't it? That thing was just out of left field, and I loved every minute of it. It was so good.
Yeah, like when a droid story was announced, some people were skeptical, but I'm like, I'm really looking forward to, like, I've been wanting a story centered solely on droids. That's not just the 80s droids cartoon that's kind of showing its age, but
Yeah.
anyway, yeah, so I guess first off, what are your experiences, if any, with like the Rogue Squadron name and stuff related to it and like past material, if you have any experience with any of that?
Oh yeah, I'm gonna just kind of hum the riff of the song that was stuck in my head for like 20 years, and it goes dun, 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 dun. Yeah, that song was basically burned in my memory because I played the video game on the N64 like every day for 3 years or something. Like, you know how it is when you're a kid in the 90s and you don't have a job yet, so you're kind of stuck playing the same game over and over and over again until it was like Christmas or your birthday, and you got a new game to play. So that was me back in the 90s. I bought the N64 to play Shadows of the Empire. Then I found out, hey, there's another game that's in the Star Wars galaxy where instead of, going around the slums of the Coruscant underworld, you're actually flying ships and fighting alongside Wedge Antilles in some time that I didn't know about. Like, oh, I don't know where this is in Star Wars, but it's fun because it's got X-Wings, Y-Wings, and all of the TIE fighters. So that's where my experience is. I have recently listened to the audio book version of the Rogue Squadron, um, the Legends Essential Collection, where they're bringing back a lot of these epic stories and rebranding them in a new format. So I've listened to the unabridged audio book. I will say, off of that, I don't know if I just was doing too much. I don't usually listen to audiobooks. Maybe I was too distracted with what I was doing while listening to said audiobook, but I didn't enjoy it as much as I wanted to. But I am willing to actually go back and read the very first Rogue Squadron book, and maybe I'll have a different experience. But no, when it comes to Rogue Squadron, it's always been that dark horse where it's like, yeah, Rogue Squadron, like just the name of it, like just squadron that has gone rogue. Like these guys are the black whatever the black, they're like the black ops of like the X-wings, right? They're the ones that do like the really tough missions that no one else is capable or wants to do, and that always just sparked my attention. Even in like the current state of the Star Wars canon, we've had how the Rogue Squadron was christened by Luke Skywalker himself in the comics, and haven't seen a whole lot of it. We got mentions of it in the Star Wars Squadrons video game, but I was ready. I was ready for the canon to introduce Rogue Squadron as a proper entity, front and center once again after the Battle of Hoth. So yeah, I was ready for it, and I've been ingrained. I love Rogue Squadron, way back in the day.
Yeah, you said Dark Horse, and that reminded me that I actually have like the digital comics of some of the like Rogue Squadron comic stories, which were on sale. I think it was like a May the 4th sale or something like that. And I still haven't read them yet, funny enough. Like I could have done that and maybe read the novels in preparation for this movie, but I decided I wanted to go in kind of blind, and I also like didn't have that much time. But I have played the first game on the N64, so there's that nostalgia, you know, seeing the planets. Like, yeah, that first game, it's classic, and like you said, I love that Rogue One sort of in canon was like the inspiration for naming the squadron Rogue Squadron. And yeah, it's great that they've decided to explore this sort of niche thing. It's not exactly, you know, the epic Jedi versus Sith story that we're so used to at this point. But yeah, I'm glad that they did this with Patty Jenkins directing it and kind of giving it a Top Gun sort of feel. What'd you think of the era or eras they chose to set this film in?
Yeah, I thought it was a really cool approach having the amount of cross-cutting between the original trilogy and a sequel trilogy, because like you said, with Top Gun, I believe, and I haven't really seen Top Gun. I know I'm an American, and I haven't seen Top Gun. How patriot I can't be a
Yeah,
patriot of my own country, or
you're not
patriotism's
missing much,
lost.
honestly.
Okay, cool, cool. Oh wow, you're like the first person that said, okay, you gotta watch it. Okay, yeah, you don't need to. But anyway, like it was cool because you have Corin Horn, who is from the original books. He's a force sensitive pilot, which is a cool journey, right? You see that throughout the books. But then you have Wedge Antilles, as we all know him from Return of the Jedi, from every one of the original trilogy. He is like the commander of Rogue Squadron in the sequel era after the fall of the First Order. So we see this cross cutting where it's almost like Arrow in a sense, the TV series where it's like Wedge is experiencing something through the cadets, and then that's also giving him flashbacks of similar moments that happened with him when his own Rogue Squadron was basically tackling the remnants of the Empire. And in this new age, they're tackling the remnants of the First Order. So there's a lot of similarities and pairings that match. So I thought it worked pretty well with him like rearing up this new version of Rogue Squadron, um, alongside of Poe Dameron, of course. So there was a lot of cool connective tissue because it is showing us like, ooh, like the battle on Coruscant that was such a big flashpoint, kind of like we've been hearing so much about the Battle of Jakku, this, and then this movie just blows open the doors. Like, yeah, that wasn't the only big battle after the Empire. There was a lot of holdouts on Coruscant, and that battle was just as deadly for a lot of people. So yeah, it was neat getting the two eras because, correct me if I'm wrong, at least not on live action, we haven't had a story that jumped around quite as much as this one between like a 30-year period like that, you know?
Right, yeah, because with Rogue One, there was that prologue that was set like something like a decade or so prior to the main events of the film, and then we get little flashbacks here and there and stuff like The Mandalorian and Book of Boba Fett. But yeah, this was really extensive, just it's almost equal the amount of time they devote to each of these time periods. And I quite like how, it feels like a Star Wars story type of movie. I think they even kind of marketed it as that, but I don't know, it's kind of confusing like with the titling of these things. But yeah, in a Star Wars story fashion, they remove the crawl and it begins on kind of a somber note. Like you see the battle over Exegol, and there's like this really sad music. It shows Snap Wexley dying, and then you see the aftermath of the battle where Wedge and he's Snap's stepdad and Snap's mom Nora. When everyone's celebrating, they're like, "Where's Snap?" And you can see like they're on their faces, they're just broken that they've lost basically their son. And in the comics, they've done like this eulogy for Snap with some of those characters, but not with the parents. So this was something I've kind of been waiting for, because it really bugged me how in Rise of Skywalker, it kind of feels like the stories with Snap in like Aftermath, Resistance Reborn, and the Poe Dameron comics, it kind of felt like those didn't happen and they just treated him as like just some character. And it was weird when like he died and then Wedge shows up and it's supposed to be triumphant, but there's like some tonal dissonance if you're one who's like followed Snap's story and knows the relationship with Wedge. And so I'm really glad that they addressed that here, and it's sort of, it gives Wedge more character, and Nora, of course, is another mentor character that this new generation of pilots has. And so every now and then they're like remembering Snap and thinking about like briefly referencing some of those memories from those other stories. So yeah, I was really glad that they delved into that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that was fantastic to see the canon tie-ins to this degree, because Nora Wexley, a completely, novel character, right? Introduced in Aftermath. You get to see her arc through not just the Aftermath books, but as you said, with Resistance Reborn. And it was a nice way to just, take a snapshot and I don't know if retcon is the right word, but as you said, they just gloss over Snap's death so much. Charles Soule brings it back up in his Star Wars issue number 25 or whatever it was that he came out with the celebration of all his previous stories. But it was really awesome. I was not expecting to see that, and it actually kind of hit me, as you said, somber. I was like, oh crap! I did not expect to get emotional in the first 5 minutes of this movie, because that meant a lot to me. That it was like, yes, this is the power of this connected universe of tying these things in together, and the fact that they use this opening as a second chance to right the wrongs that they did. And even other things, like this movie really does strengthen the Rise of Skywalker in other ways too, for me, especially with the Battle of Exegol. I always feel like the Battle of Exegol for me was a little bit underwhelming, just because we don't see enough of the battle in the skies. I feel like it's just very cut and dry.
Or the build
But
up for that matter.
yeah, like I wanted to see like the Revenge of the Sith level opening scene, where you see the capital ships like just striking blow after blow. We don't really see any capital ships fighting Star Destroyers. It's just a bunch of smaller fighters just doing the work. And so for them to actually take, like, it was like that Revenge of the Sith opening, man. It was, you see that overhead shot. It's almost like it's almost like they're part of the same galaxy or something. They took that inspiration. They opened up with a big battle in the beginning. It's like, okay, if you're not bought into this story within the first like 15 minutes, then yeah, this isn't gonna be for you, because it was done in spectacular fashion there.
Yeah, like I definitely got like Battle of Coruscant vibes, definitely. And I love that this new generation of pilots, we get familiar characters like Poe, and we even get Rose Tico, and she reminisces about her sister Paige, who, we get to see more of in flashbacks, which is nice because I kind of feel like we didn't get enough of Paige, and it's nice that we get that like a bit more of that sister bond shown here. But I like how the new pilots of Rogue Squadron, like all these new characters are like all alien. It's not just humans. So it was like really refreshing because we already have like so many human characters, you know?
Oh yeah, I mean been one of the criticisms, and it's a fair criticism of some of the recent movies and series. Yeah, it's like, this doesn't maybe feel as much Star Wars because we're not getting as much alien species to diversify from just all the humans. So yeah, to see a character like a Selkath from the planet Manan, to see uh something like along the lines of Iktachi, just all these different kind of species. What were some of the ones that really sparked your interest seeing there in the cockpits throughout the movie?
Some of their names are kind of hard to remember because throughout the movie they keep using their code names like Rogue Leader and Rogue One, Two, etc. But yeah, like you said, the Iktachi is a nice prequel throwback. There's also the Gungan pilot. I thought she was really cool. And
Oh yeah,
there's someone of Maz Kanata's species. I don't recall if we ever got that species name,
never
but
got that species name though.
yeah, but that was cool. And also the werewolf looking species, the Shistavanian, I think it is. Something like that. I think you know what I'm talking about.
Oh,
Um,
the wolf people, yeah.
yeah, and we even get Trandoshan pilot, and you know we're so used to having Trandoshans be like the villains, but in stuff here and there, I think they've slowly been showing them to be like there are some benevolent ones. So like again, the diversity. There might be a couple other species I'm kind of blanking on, but just like the different alien species that they have for the squadron, it's so cool to see, you know.
Oh yeah. Again, it just harkens back to the prequels with all the species that they had. The different. I love like you're getting in some of the slower moments of the movie. Like they're sitting around the docking bay as they're waiting for their next assignment, and you're seeing the banter between the pilots in and outside of the cockpit. You're getting to see the different cultural aspects of certain species, which we really never got in Star Wars. I'm always looking at new Star Wars media, whether it be games, movies, TV, which will incorporate something that's going to be that we haven't gotten before. So seeing something about the Miri Allens and their backstory with their like tattoo marking, or just the overall scope of just these different aliens, is just something that I didn't know I needed as much as I did, but it does really broaden the Star Wars galaxy and add so many layers to these characters.
It really does. And you mentioned the quiet moments. Sometimes we get Wedge relaying like some of his memories of like, you know, the OT days. And so we see like I guess you could say the OG Rogue Squadron and like their dynamics. So there are more humans there. So I guess it kind of balances out, I guess. But uh, I'm still not sold on what they're doing with like the de-aging. Like it's improving little by little, but I'm still not a fan of the fact that they're doing it. I kind of wish that they had just recast Wedge altogether in these flashbacks and like just have the double do everything or whatever. But I don't know. What did you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly was fine with it. I've been known to be the person that's been fine with these sorts of additions. I love the Tarkin reveal. I didn't have as much of a problem with the Luke at the end of Mandalorian season 2 as many people, and of course Book of Boba Fett. I think it's damn near perfect. Seeing the trailer for Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, I was just like, what sorcery is this? Like this is literally, is this a deleted scene from 1983 or something? Like what the hell is happening here? So I've always been sold especially as of late when it comes to all this. So for me, I was like, yeah, I mean, could they have recast? Sure. I would have probably been fine if they did, but for me, it didn't. I think the main thing that I'll say when it comes to that sort of thing is it didn't take me out of the moment. Like I didn't like just suddenly go, "Oh my gosh, what's wrong here?" and that I didn't lose my focus on what was happening in the story. So I think it worked for me at least.
Yeah, I think with Luke, sometimes like even when the face got better, like his dialogue felt robotic, like it was like they came up with it through an AI. With Wedge, he sounds robotic in these flashbacks as well, but it kind of works a bit better because he's a bit more robotic to begin with. I don't know if I'm like the only one who thinks that, but I guess that's kind of a plus in a from a certain point of view, I guess you could say. So it makes it a bit more palatable.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I know what you mean. And yeah, the voice synthesization with the AI can be a little bit off-putting, but again, yeah, I think it worked for me.
So what'd you think of the locations that we got to see in these flashbacks to the like original trilogy era?
Narshada was awesome. It was every bit as cool as I expected it to be as a longtime player of the Old Republic games and all that. And in the comic books, it's always that Las Vegas influenced neon, you know, red light district kind of thing design, which I've always been rearing to go when it comes to like, just can you give us that already? I just really want to see it already. So it's cool because like there's as much as this is a dogfighting, hit the ground running kind of movie, there was some elements of Andor in this movie as far as like the tone and the setting where it's like, yeah, not everything was actually done in the cockpits. There's some intel that's gathered, like those Black Ops missions. I love seeing Wedge in that post Return of the Jedi era. He's going to an informant or Narshada. He's like in undercover garb. It's like, dude, I didn't know that Wedge Antilles could be so cool. He's basically like James Bond at this point, and he's going around with his DL-44 and he gets stung as far as like his operation gets blown, his cover gets blown, and next thing you know, he's in the middle of a shootout in this casino in Narshada, and it's like this is the kind of stuff that I feel like I've been missing from Star Wars lately. It's just balls to the wall, get the hell out of there and get out of Dodge because then all of a sudden he's dealing with like the crime syndicates there, like the like obviously like Darshada, a lot of the power there is with the Huts, and even with Jabba being dead at this point, there's still some Huts around, and it was just crazy. So going into this movie, I'm like dogfighting, 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 and the crazy part is they completely hid this part from the trailers, and most of the time we know what we're getting into, but I liked how they just completely hid this entire like little segment of like 10 minutes out of the movie.
There's even like a flashback within the flashback. There's a moment where young Wedge is reminiscing about when he and Biggs Darklighter went on a mission together to like some remote asteroid to some Imperial outpost. And so we see like a pre A New Hope and pre Rogue One for that matter mission where like they're infiltrating a facility and it's almost like a heist, gathering intel and shooting some stormtroopers along the way. Yeah, I thought that flashback within a flashback, as Inception as it was, kind of worked in a way.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And oh, I completely forgot to mention. So I was talking about the crime syndicates, and there's even a reference to Crimson Dawn in the conversation of like when Wedge first like meets with his informant. The guy's like, yeah, Black Sun has this quarter of space now that Jabba's done. And then Crimson Dawn, we've been hearing rumors of Crimson Dawn rising from the ashes after a couple of years, after about like a year of fighting and going underground. So I was like, oh yeah, that whole Crimson Dawn trilogy by Charles Soule is paying off finally getting that nice little nod. So I had to throw that in there as a nice little mention.
Yeah, and even in the post Rise of Skywalker era, like, they go against some remnants of the First Order, but they are also intercepted by this new crime syndicate called the Crimson Dusk, which obviously took inspiration from Crimson Dawn, but there are like a variety of species in them as well. There are even some Zabraks, continuing the Maul references, I guess. And yeah, but Crimson Dusk is something I was not expecting. The name is kind of goofy, but I still think it did a nice job of fleshing out the Star Wars timeline in a way.
Yeah, it was cool because we get a peek at their leadership, and it's run by brother and sister, as you mentioned, Zabrak. So it's cool actually getting a Zabrak back in Star Wars that is not Darth Maul at the time. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it's neat because what this movie does, it's as even though it's a standalone movie, you can tell that there are a lot of threads that can be continued in either other media, whether it be movies, series, or comics, or anything really. Like, there's so many threads to pull on, that I could totally see like some kind of story continuing with the Crimson Dusk, because they are definitely starting a thread with that one. So I'm excited. I'm excited for that, and it's cool like seeing this brother and sister dynamic, this co-leadership of a criminal organization. Something again we haven't quite seen in Star Wars to this day.
Yeah, and what's funny is, by this point, the Crimson Corsair is allied with the Resistance, and so when Crimson Dusk attacks Rogue Squadron, they get the Crimson Corsair's help, and he's like, "Only I can be Crimson," and it was kind of funny. And you see him and his comrades, including Kix, played by an older Tamura Morrison, um, who is de-aged so that he looks like Kix, because Kix was frozen in the Clone Wars, so still kind of young looking. Yeah, it was nice bringing in like these pirates, and even have Maz Kanata and her pirates like helping out Rogue Squadron. And it's like I've been wanting a Star Wars pirate story, and this is a pilot story more than a pirate story for the most part, but it kind of scratches that itch a bit. People have been wanting a live action Treasure Planet, and I've been here saying like make a live action Star Wars pirate movie, call it Pirates of the Galaxy's Edge or something like that.
Again, what's so exciting about this story here is the fact that it does jump to different genres. Like I said, it goes from a spy story to just plain old Top Gun type of story to this pirate story. It's like, oh, this is a lot of fun because it changes up the variety in what you're watching, and you never know. Like this movie is a good action adventure flick, and you really don't find much downtime to like start dawdling off with other thoughts. Like there's always some excitement around the corner, and it's like, oh, what's gonna happen next? What genre are we gonna jump into next? So for me, it was very satisfying in that it just jumped around a lot and really kept me engaged throughout.
Yeah, and to even get Kicks, there's a moment where he's talking about how he feels like a man out of time, basically like Captain America. And so, he has a talk with Wedge and Nora, and they talk about like all the different things that have happened across history and whatever. And just human moments like that are really nice. And we get to see the Crimson Corsair finally be a badass on screen, as he goes against those Zabrak siblings. And it's like he manages to like use a couple like swords. I think these are like scimitars or something similar. And
Mm.
it was really cool seeing him in action while Rogue Squadron is like fighting off their ships outside of their like main cruiser or flagship or whatever.
Yeah, it's often in Star Wars, right? People are always throwing a flag at Star Wars for introducing, in the lead up to a movie or a TV series or something. It's like, oh, there's the action figures that they're trying to sell. There's the Praetorian Guards, there's the Death Troopers, there's the Range Troopers from Solo. Like, we often
Yeah.
get caught in that trap, and unfortunately, Crimson Corsair is also part of that whole equation where it's like, yeah, this guy, he's got a cool sounding voice that's modulated and all, but unless you watched, I don't even think he did anything in Star Wars Resistance, right? I think he was just like giving
Yeah.
somebody like a courier. He was like a courier or something like that. But
Yeah, he
yeah, this
gave
is a
he gave
good,
them like
yeah,
some super battle droids that he found, and I was really disappointed he didn't have more of a role in the episode. But yeah.
yeah. So again, what this story does is it strengthens things we've had, such as the role of Snap, and then the Crimson Corsair being a lot more of an important character in this, and it's just, yeah, this pirate versus criminal thing. And going back to Kicks too, something that just dawned on me is this movie basically touches all the different prequels of or all the different trilogies of Star Wars, right? You get all the stuff with Wedge from the original trilogy. You get a lot of stuff with Poe Dameron, and you get the prequel stuff with Kix, who was like, yeah, I was there during a time of war when everywhere you looked there were space battles, and we just had to get used to it, and we had to hunker down, and we didn't think about it too much because it was just part of our daily routine at that point. So it's cool. Again, like I love those quiet moments when you're like in the hangar bay and you're just hearing just the different perspectives and the viewpoints of the characters, and it really added layers. It really added a lot more to the characters of Star Wars Galaxy because yeah, we've always been following the Jedi and the generals and the big shots of the Star Wars Galaxy, but getting to know the rank and file guys that it's through their efforts is there's freedom in the galaxy. These pilots that have banded together that live off of hope and that live off of camaraderie and that live off of their camaraderie for their planets they come from, wanting to see the galaxy as a safe place. It was really neat, and I got to give them praise to Patty Jenkins and all the creatives involved with writing the story.
Yeah, I mean, with Kix, we even get like a flashback to one of the space battles he took part in, which is cool. Um, and seeing like some of those Republic and separatist army like iconography, even just for a little bit, it really reminded people like this movie honors like all the different generations of Star Wars fans, which is really cool. I know some people are saying, "Oh, this movie's too fan servicey," but I think for the most part they did it tastefully. Like whenever there was a flashback, it was in a point where it made sense and it furthered the story. Like each flashback had a lesson where they're like, "Oh, well, I remember it was like this, so that'll help us realize that we should be approaching it this way now." As they're in the present day trying to get rid of these first order remnants, because as much as the end of the Rise of Skywalker makes it seem like they were all taken down all at once, they take the approach they've taken with the original trilogy in EU and post Return of the Jedi material, which is that, well, actually realistically there would be some of them trying to run away and trying to start their own cells. And so after they face Crimson Dusk and follow more of these First Order remnant cells, like it just makes sense, like the progression of the story overall.
Oh yeah, I mean, just also a thing that I thought was always a little rushed was just the reign of the First Order. So we got a great build up, and again, another shout out to Star Wars Resistance seasons 1 and 2. Got a great build up on the how they get integrated from a force that is a smaller thing that is like, oh, we're just trying to help, but we're going to set our people here and we're going to slowly turn you to our cause before we just pull the trigger and say, hey, you're under our leadership, whether you like it or not. So I like to see their seeds, but it was like basically a year. They had an entire year to have conquered the galaxy, and then apparently they're suddenly destroyed in one battle. So that always rubbed me the wrong way. Again, I think that's one of the things with the architects of the sequel trilogy and how it's constructed was, I think they could have used more gaps of time in between Force Awakens, maybe a longer gap of time between Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker. And we could have seen more of that. But again, what's great about this is I'm sounding like a broken record here with this episode. It's just like it's strengthening things that have already been established. So we're seeing first order people that are just blatantly not even caring about the loss of their Lord and Savior Palpatine, and we're seeing that ruthlessness of them coming out because we never got to see. Well, I guess we have with the Mandalorian, but I was like, we never had a full fledged movie about like the fall of the Empire's remnants. At least not yet, anyway. I think there's going to be like a Mandalorian tie-in movie, maybe down the line somewhere we would see that first and foremost. But suffice to say, it was cool to see more from the First Order and from their perspective with that one commander that's our antagonist who's trying to rally the systems of the First Order under his belt, just like many other Imperials back in the day.
Yeah, I think that commander's name was Porridge, which is like a real weird name to give a villain.
Yeah.
But I mean, what are you gonna do? I guess. Um, and I had issues with Star Wars Resistance, the TV show, like here and there, but it was nice having cameos from like Kaz and his friends. And there's also like an instructional video that some of the new pilots watch, where it's like Harris and Dilla giving instructions on like how to be a good pilot. And also some of the simulations kind of look like Rogue Squadron video game gameplay, which was like really weird to see.
Oh yeah, it's something as far as yeah, I'm happy that it's turned out as good as it has because this movie, right, a lot of people's radars, it was like, oh, that's a dogfighting movie, that's a standalone movie, and it's like, what is what's the big deal with this movie? And getting this story that's amplifying and enhancing as many things as it has while telling an original story, it's giving me the Rogue One vibes all over again. Rogue One, is and was and is still like my favorite movie out of all the recent Star Wars movies that have come out under
Oh yeah,
Disney.
same.
So getting another one of those solid movies where it's like we're not dealing with the Jedi, but we can have just as an effective of a movie as possible, and it's expanding. It truly does expand the universe here.
Yeah. That being said, they do mention the Jedi, like they don't hide their cards and try to like build it up as like a huge surprise thing. That it's more like, toward the end, they're going on this mission to this like first order station, and in the briefing, they're like, okay, the Jedi will sneak in through this point and we'll be flying over
Oh,
this point. And so it's like we hear here and there what the Jedi are doing while mainly focusing on the pilots' perspectives. But eventually we get to see like the Jedi in action, and of course it's none other than Rey and Finn and a couple others. Like we even see like Kar Nuck Sin from the Force Collector novel, and like at the end of this, he's like, "Man, this is gonna be a really great story to pass down." And Temiri Blagg, Broom Boy from The Last Jedi, is apparently a Padawan now. So yeah, finally picking up on those threads.
yeah, and the final act of that movie, every final act of a Star Wars movie, right? You expect to have some spectacle, especially, and that was one of those things that we didn't know anything. Again, they hid this from the trailers that we would have any lightsabers in here, but it was so cool because you had that three-pronged approach actually, because you had like the infantry of the New Republic going in, then you had the dogfighters in their own battle, the Rogue Squadron themselves in their own battle, and then you had the Jedi that were just like also in this other part of the facility that were just battling in the thick of things. So it was a cool cross-cutting, a la like the Phantom Menace, which I always love when they do that in any movie. It doesn't even have to be Star Wars. When you get like those three different simultaneous aspects going on at the same time, and it's just like, okay, what's happening here? What's happening? But when the Jedi showed up, like we heard the Jedi earlier, like a reference about Rey and stuff, and it was like I instantly like sat up straight in my seat, like who? And then when he actually showed up on screen, you see Rey with the yellow lightsaber. You see Finn with a green lightsaber. I just about lost it. And I was like, yes. You said fan service. I was like, I don't care at this point. This is amazing. And I literally like clapped in the middle of the theater. It was like,
Yeah, the theater
boom.
I was in was cheering like in this final act. It definitely had that Rogue One feel in terms of how
Yeah.
excited everyone was.
Yeah. Like instead of like Darth Vader at the end of Rogue One, we had the new Jedi Order basically like fighting through this Imperial facility.
And it's so gratifying to see that the Jedi Order actually is being rebuilt. Like that's something I would have liked more of in the sequel trilogy, and they kind of hinted at it, but you get these fans who are like, "Oh, the Jedi Order needs to be destroyed," and it's like I'm not sure about that. They just need to improve the Order, and that sounds like that's what's happening here. So there's potential for future stories, whether it be more movies or maybe like books and comics and stuff, if they want to like go that route and maybe not do things that are like too super important but still go in that trajectory. And yeah, it like brings a smile to my face. Like, I'm glad that this was mostly about the pilots, but there are those seeds of like, okay, the Jedi Order, it's going to flourish still. It might fall every now and then, but it'll always come back, type of thing.
Yeah, and I couldn't help but imagine, like, we got that report from Kathleen Kennedy a while ago where it was like, Lucasfilm is not as interested in doing, trilogies anymore. But I'm starting to, like, put the pieces together where it's like, okay, I can see that the next movie might be focused on Rey and the New Jedi Order, and we'll get references to the previous movie. And that in itself will kind of turn into like the MCU version of Star Wars, where we're not getting a trilogy of Marvel movies. We're just getting this continuous ongoing story that harkens back to certain events while maybe we'll get Wedge showing up on the scene there, and then maybe we'll get, some other characters in there from Rogue Squadron that show up on the scene. So it definitely presents a new direction for Lucasfilm. And until we get more movies, we're not going to be sure how well it works. And, there's always pitfalls of doing that. I mean, DC did try to do something like this, and it didn't work entirely as well as I think they planned it. But now that Lucasfilm, and Disney and Marvel are under the same roof with Disney, I'm expecting, Kevin Feige's also had been working with Lucasfilm, so I'm guessing maybe he's giving him some pointers. So I think this is not only a great movie, but it's a great entry point into a new frontier for the Star Wars universe in the cinematic realm.
Oh yeah, and what'd you think of the music? Because they got Hans Zimmer to do a Star Wars movie finally, and yeah, like what'd you think of how the music sounded?
Yeah, it was definitely bold. I will give you that. The Rogue Squadron theme was like a riff off of that video game soundtrack that I was humming in the beginning of this
Yeah,
episode. And again, I lost my mind. I just started clapping, and then
yeah,
people in
it
the
was a
theater were
bit
like,
more dark and gritty sounding.
and people were like, "What is this idiot going on about in this theater here?" I was like, because I was like the only person I got the reference, but I'm like, they did that thing, they did the thing, and they brought it back. Yes, and yeah, but yes, you said much more grandiose, much darker. I'm like, I immediately went home, and I'm like, how can I purchase this track as soon as I can?
Does this movie honor what fans think of when they hear the Rogue Squadron name? What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think at its heart, this movie builds upon the fact that Rogue Squadron is a small team, always faced with missions that have impossible odds, and they come through with, the team being so well oiled. And it's really cool because the major part of this movie is that the team put together by Poe and Wedge in the beginning is not the most well-oiled machine. In fact, we see like a couple deaths earlier on in the movie, and that pays homage to the original books and all because they were getting people killed left and right. Like these fighters are not invincible, like these little X-wings, right? So it was cool to see that we have that arc where people just were not getting along to the point where people were just like just a strong bond. So throughout this movie, and that's basically in the post Rise of Skywalker era is this current story arc I'm talking about. But yeah, no, it worked well. I was very, very entertained and very satisfied with having this go the way it did.
Yeah, it had a like a 2 hour runtime and they crammed in a lot of stuff, but it never felt too rushed. Like the pacing of this thing really feels like a well-oiled machine, to borrow a phrase you said earlier.
Yeah, and then that middle part there with the Rishi maze, it's like we always hear about the Rishi maze
Yeah.
from that good old Basilisk himself, Dexter Jettster. And yeah, so I was always intrigued, like, what the hell is a Rishi Maze by Camino? Yeah, it's cool. Yeah, again, another like little fan moment where it's just like, oh, fly through here, and then they get attacked by the pirates. And it was even neat to see there was that one executor class or whatever they're called, the big Star Destroyer, Super Star Destroyer class, um, of this one pirate character from the Aftermath interludes. I forget the character's name. But do you know what I'm referencing? There's a big person that took over the Star Destroyers. It was cool to get that as well. Like again, seeing like the Super Star Destroyer original trilogy design, like in the post Rise of Skywalker era, like a 30-year-old something ship. It was neat. It was neat to see that, and just all the additional ship designs. Like there's a lot of new ones in here, as you would expect. I mean, it's not just TIE fighters. There are headhunters, Z95 headhunters. Like this movie is a dream for those of the people out there that love like the ship designs. A lot of stuff from Legends that they pulled in. It's like, hey, they got all the designs. Why not use them? You know, they're not doing anything, just being on the shelf. Let's pull out these designs and throw them in there. We even had some really cool, as much as the space battles we had a lot of ground battles. So they brought out the good old ADTP or whatever those, like the long-headed walkers, two-legged walkers from the video game. Again, another moment where I was like, yeah, fist pump moment. They brought that back. So out of all the movies, like this one might have actually gotten like the most fist pumps from me while I was watching it for the first time.
Yeah, there was even a modern version of Twilight Company, which is a really deep cut.
Oh, yeah, that's the other that like I was talking about the three-pronged approach at the finale. Yeah, they had those guys there. I was like, "Oh my gosh, like there are so many pieces of connective tissue in this movie." And the good thing is like they do a good job of like making sure you don't need to know these people. Like you didn't need to know, you don't have to know for you to actually get what's going on here. But if you did, then it's that little like little reward where it's like, yeah, these guys are cool. I know these guys mean business. They are the Black Ops as of the Star Wars troops infantry as the Rogue Squadron is to the New Republic fleet, you know.
Yeah, so definitely fist pump moments all around, especially toward the end. Is there anything else you want to go over before we go into final thoughts and scores?
Yeah, I think there's a really cool color palette throughout this movie. There's a lot of orange, which makes sense because that is the colors of the New Republic, right? It's so there's a lot of imagery, a lot of symbolism, a lot of like I love the end of the movie. They have like the rising sun there in the seas of Manan. You see that coming up, and it's like everybody's just like it's a new day. Basically, it's like that's it. The First Order is, as they know it, is destroyed. It's a new galaxy with a rising sun. That was a pretty cool, thought provoking moment. It's like, yep, this is the end of the chapter, and what is up next? Who knows?
Right. Yeah, they really keep stuff under lock and key, so we'll just have to wait and see. Well, that rhymed. I didn't intend that to happen. But I guess with that, what are your final thoughts and score out of 10 for Rogue Squadron?
Yeah, Rogue Squadron was a fantastic movie from start to finish that did include a lot more than I expected. Again, whenever I watch a new Star Wars anything or experience any Star Wars medium, um, any story, I'm always looking for things that haven't been done before. So in this case, okay, it's like we're getting this concurrent, current storyline, but also previous storyline while building up layers of characters, spending the time. I think Wedge it's just fantastic character. Did a lot of cool things that I've never seen before, and this was a really fun action movie that just jumped to different genres or different tones, whether it be just a straight up like dogfighting to spy action thriller to ground based fighting and to even having a Jedi pop up. So I think there was almost something for everybody hidden within this uh, high flying action movie. I'm gonna give this a 9 out of 10. I really like what Patty Jenkins did in the first Wonder Woman movie, and the second one is fine, but I think she
Right.
really pulled out all stops on this, and we know that this was really a passion project for her because her father was a pilot, and she definitely captured that tone and feeling of what George Lucas did with the very first Star Wars, with just it's like cut together pieces of a World War II dogfighting film, and basically inject that into another setting. And I think she did really well with the directing. Dialogue is exactly as you would expect in a cockpit, but again, doing the conversations in the quiet moments that spoke a lot for the current states of the galaxy, but also adding a lot of new characters to the Star Wars galaxy that I actually care about now because I know what their struggles are and they were fleshed out really well. So yeah, I'm gonna have to give this one nine proton torpedoes out of 10.
Yeah, I think I'm in agreement. I'm gonna give this a 9 out of 10 dips, like DIP, because the ships, there's
Yep.
those moments where they do like this maneuver where it's like a dip. It's hard to describe unless people have seen the movie, but you get what I mean. And yeah, this was a real crowd pleasing film. It's been a while since we've had one of those from Star Wars, so it's nice to see the fandom is mostly united about a Star Wars film for the first time in a while. So it's very refreshing. Especially after, I mean, speaking for myself, I'd been kind of having Star Wars TV show fatigue, which I know sounds ridiculous. And I even joked like a year or two ago that, like, how can you have like too much? But I honestly kind of felt it with like the varying quality in certain episodes here and there. But yeah, this movie was like really refreshing for me after all that. It makes me even more excited for what's to come. And I'm still excited for Jedi Survivor. I'm gonna be all over that video game. So yeah, it's nice to have this franchise thriving with some really great stories.
Oh hell yeah, man! Jedi Survivors. So much to talk about with that, and I'll be on here for another hour, but I will not hold you up.
All right. So yeah, thanks for being on again. Where can people find your stuff?
Sure, thanks for inviting me for a really fun topic tonight, Rogue Squadron. Find that part of the franchise as very sentimental to me in my old gaming days. But yes, as far as following my content and all, you can find me mainly on YouTube where I'm making content under the same moniker, Starrapter, youtube.com/Starrapter. You can also find me on Twitter talking about games and other things, also at Starrapter. So there you go.
Yeah, and I'll include links to those in the show notes. Email this podcast at delayedreplaypodcast@gmail.com. Let us know your thoughts on flashbacks. You can also follow me at Steven Shinder on Instagram and Twitter, Steven Shinder Storytelling on Facebook. You can also find me on Yesshift, a podcast/vlog I do with my dad, where we talk about the band Yes and have talked to some of their members and people who've worked with some of their members. You can also go to stevenshinder.com for info on my novel Lemons on My Grain. And like I've said before, the next book, Trespassing Through Visages, will be out sometime in the new year. So keep an eye out for news on that. Yeah, follow me on Letterboxd. My handle is Rotten Tormato, and follow me on Goodreads. I guess But yeah, I guess I'll do it. And the next episode will be on Scoob Holiday Haunt, which got canceled in that other universe for some reason. So that'll be interesting to talk about for the holidays. And yeah, that'll do it. And without further delay, have a good day.